This is the Alliouagana Festival of the Word. I am Nerissa Golden, and today for Conversations, we're almost at the end of the literary festival this year. And today in Conversations, I have Dr. Yvonne Weekes and Dr. Danny Joseph. Let me tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll jump right into our conversation. Danny Joseph hails from Harris Village, where he sat at the feet of teachers of the St. George's Primary School. Following masquerade to town, he attended the MSS, after which he caught a LIAC return flight to Barbados. I think that return flight is key. There at UWI Cave Hill campus, he did an undergraduate degree in computer science and mathematics. Back in Montserrat, he lectured in a variety of subjects at the Montserrat Secondary School and Montserrat Community College, in addition to being a speechwriter for the Debating Society. He eventually crossed the Atlantic for postgraduate studies in the UK, culminating in a PhD in business and management. Wow. He is currently a fintech researcher and has authored multiple patents in the fields of digital currencies and machine learning. He writes as a hobby, with the emphasis being on capturing Montserrat history through personalities and the minutiae of life. Welcome, Dr. Danny Joseph. I know we're just going to call you Danny because I know you're not into the whole title thing. Dr. Yvonne Weekes is a writer of poetry, prose, and drama from Montserrat. She has taught theater and English in London, England, and in Montserrat before moving to Barbados in 1996 following the Soufriere Hills volcano eruption. Her poetry and prose have appeared in Interviewing the Caribbean and Cooey. A recipient of the Frank Collymore Literary Endowment Award, Dr. Weekes is a lecturer in theater at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, and I am holding a copy, an autographed copy of her book, Nomad. We met up at Carafesta in Trinidad. Oh, yes. Yeah, and I got mine. So welcome today. I am so happy to be able to do this because this festival is all about the word and writing. And I thought it was important that we not just look at people who have put it all together in a book, but just all of the myriad of ways that we are using words to tell stories and reflections. And that's where our conversation, we want to take it today. So I want to give each of you a chance. I just gave you the formal stuff, but tell us a bit about what's interesting to you right now in your life. What are you doing that you want to share a bit with us about who you are? Dr. Yvonne, let me start with you.
Yvonne. Okay. So the lockdown has been kind of interesting for me because I had to teach online in the second semester, and it was difficult for students, some especially for art students, the acting students. It was challenging, but I learned a lot of new skills. I learned how to maneuver Zoom, and I thought, I always say to myself every year, I got to learn something new and something different. And so the technology didn't quite beat me. The first two classes, I was a mess, but after that, I felt quite comfortable. But just because of the lockdown, normally I kind of write intermittently, I have an idea, right? But I'm not a professional writer. And when I say that, I mean, I'm not someone who gets up every day like some professional writers that I know who writes every day. Mm-hmm. But during the lockdown, I found myself writing every single day. And I found myself making more observations about human behavior than I'd ever made before. And I began to become really excited because it was a time, especially during the June, July, when we broke was that I was able to really spend a lot more time on my craft and, just to become an ambitious writer so that I go from one stage of writing to another stage of writing. And so I'm really excited because I feel like I'm finally, although you never really get it, finally really kind of crafting and recrafting. Some of the work came very, very easily to me. I must say, and that was kind of scary. But I've spent more time writing since COVID and really kicking myself and saying, do this line better. This is not the right word. This is not the right phrase. Is this what you really want to say? I'm really also being much more philosophical about my work. So that's what I've been very busy doing, apart from teaching.
Okay, Danny, what have you been up to?
So yeah, so I'll keep it right in focus. So just like Miss Weeks had said, or Yvonne had said, I've been trying to focus on writing. I think like a lot of my writing has been on Facebook, and a lot of the reaction from people is, I should write a book. So I mean, they might be happy to hear that is actually in consideration and planning. But
Yeah.
yes, but writing a book, I quickly realize isn't really easy. It's a big difference from writing a short story to like this giant novel. There's a lot more logistics and planning, and there's a lot more to it. It's kind of like if you ask somebody if somebody could say use a hammer correctly, and you say, okay, you should build a house, and it's very difficult. It's very different from hammering something to building a house. So it's a lot more that goes into writing a book than people might probably realize. And so like I kind of really respect people who have actually sat down and written large novels. So like I quickly realized that the process isn't that simple, and there's a lot to learn. As I said, there's a big difference between writing a short story and a big book. So rather than say kind of jump in willy-nilly, so to speak, I've tried to like go about the process. I learning a lot before like I start writing, and the learning involves doing a lot of reading. So you'll see above my cabinet there's a lot of books. I've actually been doing quite a bit of reading, and not just say books, but books about writing. So learning to write, etc. And because you could always improve your skills. So like Yvonne, I know she's quite qualified as a writer, and yet she's still trying to improve her craft.
Mm-hmm.
So like myself, like people say, oh, Danny, you can write whatever. But at the same time, I'm still not quite satisfied with what I write. So, and there's still like levels between like what I could produce and what like the best artists could produce. So like the books I would get would actually be the books on the best authors. I'd have to like Google, what's the best novel, what's the best fiction, what's the best literary fiction, etc. And actually go about and read that book to kind of improve my craft. And like say it's not just about the writing. So like say themes and say philosophy. So I've actually been reading like some Jungian, I don't know how to pronounce it, and like some Sigmund Freud book to get a kind of better understanding of the human mind. Because when you understand people better, you write better. And I would like the book to have like real complex themes that are just different things more than just the writing. Mm-hmm. So whether all those come together to form something cohesive and entertaining, we'll have to wait and see. But I've been doing a lot of researching as well as doing a lot of writing. There's all kind of history aspect to my writing because I kind of focus on historical aspects of one side. So I've been doing a lot of research in that department as well as writing in that department. A lot of it hasn't been published yet, but we'll see. So that's more or less what I've been up to. Trying to learn about writing. I've written some stuff, but they're not really ready yet. So eventually, hopefully, they'll be published in some capacity.
That's good. That's good. And something just to remember is that anything you publish, if you turn around and publish it in a book, you're actually plagiarizing yourself. So you might actually have to hold back on a lot of the stuff that you want to put into the book and save it for that versus, sharing it with us. Yeah, we'll just have to wait. But I definitely look forward to seeing what you come up with. Tell me about growing up on Montserrat. How important were stories back then to how you got to understand the community you live, the island, and the world at large? Yvonne?
Well, I came to Montserrat in 67, before you guys were born, probably. I came with my mom and dad and my other siblings, and it was a really different world for me because up to that point, I only knew London. And I just remember Montserrat being a fun, like to me, it was like a big nature paradise. I remember hiking with all my school friends from MSS. I remember going to the waterfall and taking out and just smelling the sulfur from the souffle. I remember, going to Isles Bay and Little Bay, and it was just, for me, you know what is interesting? It's like you kind of forget a lot of stuff. And then as you get older, you begin to appreciate it more. So recently I started singing these songs that I learned at MSS with the late Dr. George Irish and from the late Edith Bella Allen. I loved those two people. When I think about Montserrat, those two human beings are the reason I understand something about folk and folk culture and what it is to be a Montserratian and to have a really positive sense of self. And I started singing folk songs to my grandchildren. Now, it's interesting that I never sang these songs to my son. So he heard me recently and he's like, Mommy, what are you singing to the kids? And I said, these are songs I learned at Montserrat Secondary School when I was in the Glee Club and when Edith Allen led Emerald Community Singers. And I remember singing at the University Center, and I realized that despite the fact that when I went back to the UK and I studied I studied English and theatre, and there was no Caribbean literature, there was no Caribbean theatre, I felt grounded as a Caribbean person. I felt grounded as a Montserratian because of what the Montserrat Secondary School at that time gave me. I remember doing drama at the Montserrat Secondary School. I remember people like Gus White singing for St. Patrick's Day, and just the sense of pride and the sense of history that I got. So that when I went back to school in the UK, I never really saw, I mean, even though, yes, I was born in England and I spent most of my life in England, I always knew that I was going to return to Montserrat, and that I was and that I was a Caribbean person in a way that my school friends at Hornsey, I went to Hornsey School for Girls in Haringey, they didn't have that, because many of them had never even visited the Caribbean until they were adults. So I felt very blessed, I felt very privileged, and I felt an understanding, so that even just remembering people like David Edgecombe, who is my cousin, I had all of those strong memories of what was possible as a Montserratian. So, and as a Caribbean child. So when I went back to England, the other children some of whom were kind of messed up, I didn't have that. I was very focused. I was very motivated. And I knew, because of, Mr. Osborne and my father and, Dr. Wooding, all these people, that I could do whatever I wanted, and in a way that a lot of children, when I went back to England, did not have. And Montserrat gave me that confidence. That's what I would say.
Danny, what did stories mean to you growing up? And do you have these similar memories in terms of your youthful time here?
So I find that within my writing, the character that I always envision is a child growing up in Harris's village. So it's like it's hard for me to get outside that box, and it's because like the stories that I kind of grew up with were like actually the life that I lived, not necessarily like me personally, but like my neighbors, the people in the village, my friends at school. That's where the story happened, because certainly there were not like books that I would read that have much of stories. There just wasn't that. In the primary school books, they may have something about Peter and Jane and Master Willie, I remember something like that. But it was kind of like very limited. The books that I would read were, like the classic childhood novels and so that would be available in the public library, but they weren't a mass of stories. So, for better or worse, the stories that I would read or that would be formally presented were more or less television for me, as well as the books that I would read. And so like you have insight into like an American high school or, some red bus in the UK and stuff like that there. But they weren't Caribbean-centric stories. And of course I enjoyed reading those and watching television as a child. But like the stories that were there and that were present for me were actually just the lives of the people around me and the life that I lived. If you go up the road and then something happens that day, that was interesting. And then within our friends, we talk about that. It wasn't as formal. I would hear about when people would sit on the steps like old people and sit on the steps and then tell stories to their children. I wasn't part of that generation, unfortunately. It's like I kind of grew up in the 80s, 90s, where television was the main source of stories for us.
Did you know back then that that it might have value outside of just you and your friends, or was it just about saying, hey, you know what happened this afternoon when I went down the road?
Yes, and the answer is absolutely not. You didn't know. It was just another day in your life, and something interesting happened, but you don't know the significance of it. And I think that's one of the appeals of the things that I write on Facebook, because I would just talk about something that may have been not that significant at the time, and then you write about it in a way that's honest, but then you realize that there was something that interesting that happened there. So like I remember a story I wrote about like a friend of mine went to cut grass in a nearby estate, and I mean that's more or less it. And then the owner of the estate like was kind of angry at us for climbing his coconut tree. And it's like a simple basic premise, but when you write about it, you realize there's a lot of stuff that's interesting there that would capture aspects of monster life within that short narrative. So like even simple things within our day that we took for granted are actually quite compelling stories if you actually pay attention to them.
Okay.
And there's complex issues of class in that story,
that's very
as well, and power and hierarchy in that particular
there's
story.
actually something I don't want to go talk about for a bit.
Go right ahead.
Yes, go right ahead. So like I probably will, but maybe it might be a bit redundant now. But in primary school, when she talks about class, I remember we used to play rounders, and the boys who like, they're not from like the prestigious families, the poor, and they would tend to be the ones who get lashed a lot, right? And like the girls who from wealthy families and so, whether by design or not, they were not getting lashed. So when we used to play rounders, I mean, the boys used to really aim that ball at the girl. They used to fight violently as a kind of, to get out a kind of animosity within them, because they found that there was a class division where these people were kind of protected in the classroom by the teachers. And then we were not, so like round was a way of getting revenge on that. But like I said, there's a whole class divided that you don't necessarily see at the time. When you look at it now, that's more or less what was happening.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And we're going to get into more of that, because I found a story that I published on Discover. I didn't realize we've been doing this for a while, since 2016, one that you wrote that I went back and pulled up, but I'm going to get to you in a minute. Yvonne, I want to talk to you about Nomad for a second. Why did you pick this title? And do you consider yourself a nomad? I didn't realize you weren't born in Montserrat. I thought this was where it all began. So tell us the title and how this connects with what we're going to find inside.
So interestingly enough, this was not the original title of the book, but I had sent the work. I'd sent 12 of the poems to the late Kamal Brathwaite. And I actually called the collection Fragments at that time. And he wrote me back and said, well, he just wrote me back and said he didn't like the title, and he told me why he didn't like the title and so on. And then I realized when I completed the book that I started, if you notice in the book, I start basically in the UK. And then I go through this journey, and then I come back, and I'm not quite sure. Well, home is wherever you want it to be anyway. Right. I think, because home is also a metaphorical space, not just a geographical space. And it has to be for me, because I've had many homes. So I felt that at the time that I didn't think this was going to be my ending home. That somehow, I didn't know COVID was happening, obviously, that I was going to end up retiring and going back to Montserrat and journeying between Montserrat and maybe visiting my family in the UK, which is where most of my family are. So, and historically, we're nomadic people, and the Caribbean people are nomadic. We would probably and probably always will be, because we migrate for various reasons. We migrate because of disaster. We migrate for opportunities, for education. We migrate because maybe we marry someone from another space. And I think that in a way, yeah, this is my home right now, but I'm still at a point where I could move to another space. And I feel that I have the capacity emotionally to give to any space I live, and give as fully as I would any other Montserrat. So yeah, so I'm kind of nomadic, and a lot of Montserratians would not remember or even know that I wasn't born in Montserrat. So
Okay.
yeah.
So let me jump on that idea for a minute about being nomadic and being comfortable being in any space. Do you think that for a lot of us, sometimes we do it and we know we have to do it or we need to do it, but usually it comes attached to maybe a sense of failure, like maybe I didn't succeed where I am and I wasn't good enough to make it here, so I'm going to try somewhere else. Tell me about how you attack this idea within the book, in terms of was it always this sense of ownership of who you were so that you could shine, or is it, or do you explore the idea of inadequacy?
I don't explore inadequacy, but I do explore other people's perception of me being other and otherness, and therefore not, and therefore there are moments in the poetry where I'm not whole, as in WHOLE. There are moments where people say, "Why are you here? Where do you come from?" But the literature is replete with that question. Broadmoor, Louisiana, where are you from? I have a different accent in Barbados. To me, I just sound regular. So there's this notion of the host country being this inhospitable space. And I think that happens whether Montserratians go to the UK or go to Antigua or come to Barbados. And so the book for me, when I reflect back on my own writing, because you can look back at your writing and investigate what are the lessons learned. What I realized is that I was navigating the home as the geography. So for me, Cain is alien. No Cain no grown in England, and no Cain no grown in Montserrat, right? It's alien. I don't have memories here the way I have when I go to Montserrat. I remember going to Montserrat Secondary School, and I remember this, and I remember that. I don't have those kind of memories. So one of the weirdest things for me is when they have school week here. So the St. Michael's School wear their ties, and Harrison College wear their stuff, and the Combermarians have their activities. I don't have those memories. And so there was a point in the Nomad text and in my own personal walk where it was very alien, and there was a sense of being inferior, but that inferior word is from the perspective of others, not mine. And so at the end of Nomad, I know who I am. I'm very confident. I feel I can succeed wherever I am. And that is, again, going back to the kind of childhood I had in Montserrat that's made me that kind of person. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's a point where you have to navigate not being able to vote and feeling of being disenfranchised. Those are one of the themes of the book. But then the Yvonne Weekes and the other people here, including our very own Sharon Edgecombe, who is an amazing lawyer here, mm-hmm. we're going to fight in the court of law for the right to vote. And that takes a kind of guts. And I'm telling you, I'm confident that it's Montserrat that gave us those kinds of, that level of confidence. So you navigate, I can't vote and I've been here paying taxes all these years. Mm-hmm. And so the book deals with all of those things in a creative way, but as a critical piece of work. You can see my journey from this, where do you come from, why are you here, which is what all host countries ask other people.
Right.
Not remembering that none of us come from here anyway. All Caribbean people came from someplace else.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. Danny, Now that you are based in the UK, do you find these memories of Montserrat grounding in a way? And you have actually been eulogizing lots of the people, the men, especially that have come from your village. What has being away from Montserrat done to you in terms of the value of these memories and the need to tell these stories? What's that been like, that process?
Well, I think I could say, and it's very true, that I can't really relate to the UK, you know, despite the fact that I've been here so long. I can't relate to the surroundings as I can't relate to the surroundings. Once that is like inherently within me, and I can't get away from that. And of course, yes, that distance, physical from Montserrat makes Montserrat even more important to me. So even like certain things, whether certain music that when I was in Montserrat I wouldn't listen to as much, say, with a calypso or whatever, I kind of took it for granted. Like when I'm in the UK, I find that is more appealing to me because it kind of like pulls me back to Montserrat.
Yeah.
So the writing, the research I do, there's photographs that I dig up, all of those are really, maybe some psychological thing in me that's really not an accident in terms of keeping me in touch with Montserrat. So yes,
Yeah.
that's definitely true.
Okay, so I want to dive into some of your work for a bit. I hope you have something on tap, but I want to touch on this one that you wrote, a tribute to Windspear. It's Thomas Punch Windspear. Is this the Windspear that was in the string band?
Yes, it was.
This is when right after he passed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you start telling us a story about you and another friend going out with Windspear into Harris's to just up in the bush. And you talked about his speed and the fact that he was way older than you all. This was in the early 2000s. And he was way older, but yet he was navigating this space that had now been covered with trees and grass and everything. And I just want to read a little bit of what you wrote. Thomas Punch also always seemed to know where next step in what one would suppose would have been forgotten topography. Be mindful of the fact that Harris's and every path towards Harris's is completely overgrown with trees. The village had been abandoned for near a decade at that point in time, and nature was relentlessly reclaiming what was originally hers. But none of this mattered to Thomas Punch. He'd be effortlessly blazing a trail ahead of the group. I'll emphasize the word blaze to instill with you the incredible rate at which he traversed the mossy, entangled forest. Me and the other guy would be resting on rocks, grabbing desperately for the already emptied water bottles in our backpacks, while Thomas would be hundreds of meters ahead, shouting at us about something interesting he had just seen. He was much older than us. Not only did he know bush, as being able to navigate his way through it, he also knew bush, in that he knew what medicinal properties they provided. I'm walking and just seeing faceless leaves, faceless plants. Meanwhile, Thomas is identifying every plant and tree and saying their local names and what health benefits they provided or were thought to provide. I'm talking of a level of flora knowledge beyond the common plants that the average person knows. He never pursued or probably had the opportunity to pursue a more formal version, but he was highly educated in his own way. Now, you talk about, I get such a sense of respect for this man that it wasn't the first time you'd spent time with him, and you definitely admired his capacity, his knowledge, and just his the way he navigated that space. Because you also go on to talk about him being able to go off. He said, "Coming right back," and then you'd keep walking, and he'd end up right where you were through some other, mysterious path. Tell me why you think it's so important for you to be sharing these stories now with us. Because one of the things I recognize is I left Montreal when I was very, very young. So I don't have any MSS stories. I don't have any Harris's stories. And they actually make me very nostalgic for a time I don't know, but also give me a sense of identity and belonging, because this is actually the island that I love. So why now, and why is this important to take these common men and turn them into heroes in a way, in a story?
Okay, so I'll center it around two things. First one is a lot of history is being lost, right? A lot of memories are being lost, and like people tell me like I have a good memory, and I didn't realize it until I started telling my stories. And like, Danny, how you remember that? How you remember that? And I thought all along that everybody remember these things. It turns out that a lot of people haven't. You know, even some photos, some billion, and say, "Oh, they don't know where that is." I'm like, "How could you not know? That's just the only thing." So I think by accident, people are forgetting a lot of stuff. They think they remember a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that's being forgotten. So some of that. So I realize that stuff has value. So I'm trying to preserve that. So in terms of like the historical aspect, whether persons or photographs or whatever, it's about preservation. And when you have things written down, I would say they're more preserved than say oral history. Both have their places, but it's good to have things written down. The second thing, I mean, my love for Harris is evident. People.
I have to tell Salas, because Salas talks about Harris's non-stop.
Yeah, I should write about Salas as well.
Oh, I will tell him we have this interview. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the other thing is like in terms of Harris's, when I think about Harris's, I put up like this kind of conceptual scenario where let's assume that the volcano stops. We can go in and clear off the roads, clean up the houses, and everybody who has traveled overseas, diaspora, wherever, who lives in Mossad, can actually go back. Imagine a scenario like that happens. When I think of that scenario, you know, what I realize, like, if that happens, and if I were to walk to Harris's, a lot of houses will be empty because the people who live there have died. So, like, when I left Harris, I was like a teenager. Now I'm kind of like say middle age.
Not yet.
Not yet.
The people who are senior citizens have died. You know, like there's a like everybody just moving up to another tier, and a lot of people have died. That's just clear. And a lot of history lies within those people and their stories, because not just the person himself, but that person intersects with various aspects of Harris's life. So with the Thomas thing that you mentioned, like I said, it refers to knowing plants and stuff like that there. And like, and that kind of culture, that mountain man kind of thing, is not really as common now, I think.
Right.
But it was very much a part of our lives, you know, like the average family had sheep and goat and they would go mountain and stuff like that there. And that's not really happening nowadays days. So like I feel like if you preserve people, you don't only like preserve their memory, but because they interact with society, that interaction, you actually preserve that, and those kind of stuff kind of define us. Right. So that's another aspect. The second aspect is that like in history, the people who are lionized and memorialized and written about tend to be people who have kind of achieved things, say academically and stuff like that. The person who's winning the OBE and those kind of awards, you know, are people who, you know, celebrated the politicians, top level citizens, etc. But I found that when I was thinking of Harris's, the people that actually remember the more colorful personalities, you know, is not the person who has like a middle class job and wakes up and go to work every day and come home. You know, that person can like easily forgettable. It's the person at the margins, you know, the creative, you know, that kind of crazy man on the road, you know, the old man who goes to mountain and stuff like that there. I find those people are more compelling than, you know, the average middle class. Right? And society doesn't necessarily celebrate them, but those are the people who actually like define the village for me. You know, the colorful personalities that define the village. And I knew Thomas, like I said, we used to hike into Harris's a few times. So I knew him, and like when he talked, I was kind of, you know, this guy is probably going to be forgotten, you know, and there isn't somebody out there who will probably do something like that for him. So you know what, let me write about Thomas. And you know, it became that article that I finally written. And like, I mean, like Facebook allowed people to share stuff. So maybe some people would have said, who wouldn't have known him, will now remember him, and like that story is out there now, and it helps his memory. I think even his family had contacted me about it and saying, you know, they really appreciate it. So there's a lot of dimensions to it in terms of preserving history, you know, celebrating life, as well as capturing parts of my identity even within that.
Right. I think also it's a sense of understanding value and what really is valuable about us. And I
Yes.
think in a time when we were looking at the other as being more valuable than us and the way that they were telling us to be, to suddenly give credence to the people around us who are making our life happen, you know, is very important. The minute you said go a mountain, I immediately thought about my grandfather, and I started to miss him because he grew up here. He was a mountain man, but he wasn't someone I got to spend time with because we were living somewhere else. So for me, this story is actually very close to me simply because it makes me feel as if I am understanding what my grandfather's life was like, because what you described is exactly what his daily journey was while he was alive. So thank you so much for that. I want to give both of you a chance to just share a piece of something. It could be something you've already written. You know, you could take us to Nomad, Yvonne. Bring one of those poems alive for us, or maybe it's something that you've been writing. You have been sharing some of your work, your COVID poems on
Yes, I
Facebook.
have.
So you're welcome to do
Normally,
that as well. I won't pick.
right, normally I do not do that, Nerissa. But
Yeah.
I just decided that why not share them? So I'm going to share one poem that I wrote recently, and I chose this poem because I wrote it from a very gendered perspective, from a female point of view. And I could not believe the number of men who went on and said, this captures my own experience exactly. Single men, married men, family men, professional men. It was just so amazing. So I'm going to read it. It's called Isolation. Danny, I hope you like it as well.
Yes, I'm sure we will.
So it's called Isolation. And I try more than ever to write the way I talk, which is I go from standard English comfortably to my version of one session. All right. And for nearly 3 months, not a word, not a sound. Days roll into one another. Not a loud music coming from Cross Gilbert Plantation. Not a psst, you sexy thing as you walk past a building site. Them just stand up like them done, just laying waste. Not a phone call of empty promises asking, I could pass by you. You want to have a drink with me? Not a sign of life. Everything brought down, just so. Cars pan street barely moving. No revelers ain't bussing, ain't partying, ain't liming. Not a man hollering for you on the road. Not a man ain't blow you one dry kiss. Not even one man now check for you. Curfew done. Stop all of that. Everything just still, except for the single lines winding around the food shops. Cause we need bread and fish for the holy days that coming. It was like the end of love, the end of romance, and all you had for company was your Bible open on the same page. Empty. Computer buzzing and phone WhatsApping the next case, the next death. The news coming at you in the bed, dank and empty. Radiation quietly roaring, killing you just as much as the damn virus. What kind of silence was this at all? And some of us could hear our own lives echoing in the silence and emptiness. That's it.
Wow. Yeah. I think
A lot of
Yeah.
men. It's very much a woman's perspective, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But I was so amazed. I mean, one guy wrote me and said, please post more of your isolation poems. They mean so much to me. So, yeah. So I've just been writing.
Good. Because I think people this year has probably amplified for many people how alone they really are and how alone we've been living, how important our phones have become to how we connect with everybody, and that we've probably actually not no longer been valuing the face-to-face and in-person contacts. We take those for granted. Oh, I'll message you later, I'll inbox you, and not recognizing we really should have made that moment to have coffee with a friend and or give that hug.
Yeah,
So I think that's really good, and hopefully when we can do all of those things again, that we will do it and not choose to just
exactly.
stay at
Yeah.
home. So Danny, you're up. Share something, a little bit of something that you're doing. Could be old, it could be old, doesn't have to be part of what you're doing now.
This is a tough choice. I know. um, this is something I wrote recently, and it's about an actual fight that happened, a famous fight during my time in primary school.
A famous fight.
Yeah. The people who went to St. George will know about it. So it goes like this. White smiles with missing teeth squeezed through the doors and poured out into the sun. The schoolyard came alive with green, khaki, and imagination, freed as they were from a disciplined silence and the unspared rod. Swarming as ants investigating weighted footsteps, each unspoiled child sought to be the first in the queue to lunch, first to the bathroom, first to clasp the torn rubber of a cracked cricket bat. Outside the kindergarten door, the wide-rimmed frames of Teacher Darkus diffused the sunlight while the chasing breeze played at the edges of her flowered dress. In her piano fingers, she clutched the handle of the bronzen bell as the last of the chimes circled the yard, then scurried over the trees of Jackman Hill. Pushing the lunchroom door open with her back, the lunch lady emerged with a desk in her hands, placing it a meter away. Another desk soon followed. The gathered throng of youthful eyes and hungry belly waited patiently as she placed old plastic cups filled with lemonade across the table. Next came the sack of bread rolls, each filled with chunks of thin cheese and 2 swipes of margarine. As the sun further established itself in the midday sky, the students scattered like its rays across the playground. With filled stomachs and sugared energy, they chased cricket balls over the roofs and skipped with ropes of tree vines. Green balls struck by roundest captains swept past paper planes near the upper branches of 2 breadfruit trees. The fastest of the athletes won the races, and the blood of clumsy knees stained the water running freely from the standpipe. Just another day in the life, till we heard her cry. Outside the schoolyard, Nellie Cox fought against Pilot, the deaf and the mute. Dropping their cricket bats, the children ran to the ensuing battle between the enraged pensioners, ran to the violence that rent away curtains of childhood innocence. Encountering a chaotic flurry of fists and tongue-washing bad words, the children formed a curious but frightened perimeter around the combatants. Pilot was a farmer and stood about 5'10". He was a strapping man, as the local descriptor goes. He was the type you call to restrain rampaging bulls and lift crocus bags of sweet potatoes from the mountains. Normally a gentle soul, but on that day, despite the inability to speak, his anger was loud and visceral as he threw himself at her in a fit of rage. Nellie, his neighbor, was closer to 70, and her frame was one that needed bracing from gusts of wind. Her historical violence was never more than that of a fiery tongue met with meek retreat. However, here she faced ears insusceptible to reprimand and a counter of thudding fists. In the pathway, they exchanged fists driven by anger and words dripping with vitriol. The children stood aghast at the ugly, but much to their amazement, Nellie never took a step backwards, trading vicious blows that sent reverberations past Pilot's eardrum. With an unexpected physicality, she fought Pilate as her equal, receiving thunderous blows to her head in return. For a brief moment they separated, only by chance and not design, the chest heaving in forgotten exhaustion. The student stood frozen, betrayed by the introduction to this raw, primordial violence. The search for some understanding in a collapsing world of alphabets and the shoes of their parents. Meanwhile, Pilate reached for a fist-sized stone amidst the weeds. The student body reared back as the stone struck Nellie in the middle of her face, and the blood poured down her nostrils, adding red to the coterie of colors of her dress. Panic overtook the children, who saw crimson as the harbinger of the black of death. Yet while the tears of the overcome kindergartners dripped onto the weeds and their screams brought out the teachers from the classrooms, Nellie fought back, indifferent to her wounds, enraged by the indignity of blood. Her head ties stamped brown underfoot, she launched into Pilate in a renewed assault of brutal kicks and flailing arms on the wild mane of grain hair. Students and teachers ran to the only force of nature powerful enough to end the growing calamity, the principal. I think I'll end it there. I don't know.
Wow. Okay. First of all, I thought it was going to be a fight among the students in the school. Yvonne, didn't you think that?
I did, but when he started to describe these two old people, I was like, Father Jesus, where is this story going? But what I loved about the story is look at what the children, how the children played. No technology.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what the children were playing with. Look at what entertained and amused them. I'm like, that was what children playing was about.
Yeah.
And now it's about phone, games, TV. Yeah.
But you know, I will say that on Montserrat, you can still see kids playing outside and things like that. You see kids, you might see them get a ball on a cricket ball and play cricket on the beach when they go out. You do still see some of it, and I love it when I see parents tell so put the device down, go find something else to do.
Right.
Yes, so that's important to give them that powerful imagery, Danny.
Yes.
I could literally see this fight happening, and I'm like, whoa, this woman sounds impressive. and suddenly I want their backstory. I want to know, has she been taunting him a long time? And just because he can't hear doesn't mean he can't feel that she's giving off this energy. What triggered this fight? So, oh wow. Okay. So Danny, if you haven't been familiar with his work before, now you need to be paying attention to Danny Joseph. If he allows you to follow him on Facebook, you could probably get a taste of some of the things that he's published before, and know now that we are going to be cheering for you to finish that novel. Yeah. However long it takes, we want to get it, and we just wish you much success with that process. Yvonne, tell us how we can get a copy of Nomad and also connect with you.
Okay, so I have my first book. You can get from People Tree Press. This is really a gift in a way, because I wrote this as my journal, Danny. I was just journaling how I felt about moving from Montserrat and the pain of moving. And actually, Kamal Brathwaite encouraged me to write it and to get it published. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to do that. But I submitted it for an award in Barbados. And so you can get this on People Tree Press or on Amazon.
Tell us the title. What's the title? We can't see it.
It's not Volcano. So, oops, hold on. I have to do the opposite. I should know this because I'm a drama teacher.
It's good. I can see. Yeah.
So this was published by People Tree Press, and to be honest, it surprised me how there are many universities who are now running courses, creative writing courses in disaster writing, and so it's a required text. Which is really a gift. I mean, totally surprised to me. Nomad was just I was determined I was going to write poems. I had to figure out that I could. And I went and I worked and I worked and I worked. I don't find poetry easy though, Danny, to be honest. But this, I don't find it easy, and it's not easy. But the new work that I'm doing is really exciting for me. This you can get at Montserrat. It's in Shirley's Shirley's
at Hilltop.
yeah, it's near. Shirley has it, but you can also buy it from the publisher, which is House in Nehesi. I've been very blessed that publishers have been interested in my work, and it's also on Amazon. I don't know how it's. People tell me they buy it from Amazon. I don't know how, but so I'm very blessed in that regard.
All right, we'll be putting the links in the comments of the video, so people are able to go and check them out and connect with you on your different social accounts. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us today. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to share your stories, and I hope you recognize that there's no one way to tell a story. It's about just sharing what's important to you and your memories, and it's very important to enhancing the conversation, which is ours, which is our identity. So please tell your story. We want to hear it. We want to hear it.